Welcome to today's Fireside Chat. It's time for another episode of Mustard Hub Voices Behind the Build, where I sit down with the people building, backing, and running better workplaces. I'm your host, Curtis Forbes. Our guest today is Zach Chertok. Zach is the Senior Research Manager for Employee Experience at IDC, and there he looks at all aspects of how organizations support, equip, and enable employee journeys to ultimately benefit from them across modeled KPIs. He's been in the labor and organizational management space for 17 years on various sides of the technology and services sectors that enable companies to optimize success with their people. In that time, Zach has had the opportunity to work in and with a lot of different industrial sectors spanning a variety of organizational sizes to understand and advise through various perspectives on tech, organizational management, project planning, and more. Today, he brings that advisory to IDC, leading IDC's EX practice while also teaching at Columbia University. Welcome to Behind the Build, Zach. Thanks for joining me.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
That is quite a bio. You teach and advise as a hobby. Is that right?
Yeah, when I got into teaching for the first time, it turns out it's the best environment to just be in the room with people who are unafraid to think and promote their ideas. Fell in love with it and just never wanted to stop.
Yeah.
And advisory, I always joke, pays the bills. Teaching is kind of where the hobby and the interest and the lifeline is. So
I
being able to do
love
both in the
that.
same arena is a great opportunity.
You also teach for Columbia, so it's kind of it's kind of funny that usually hobbies are things we do when we leave work, but when you leave work, you decide the best thing that I'm going to do right now is go back to work.
Yeah, the best description I ever heard was, because I'm a New Englander through and through, was a description of the Appalachian Trail and the folks who built it, that New Englanders have this weird habit that they like to work for fun.
Maybe that's where I got it from all those years when I lived up there. You have a really interesting career trajectory, and I took a look at your LinkedIn profile before our session here. You and I have gotten to know each other just a little bit. It looks like you originally went to school for civil engineering and applied mechanics, and today you're a strategist and analyst at IDC. So tell me, what does that journey look like? I'm curious to hear about that path.
So first of all, it's actually really common for a lot of civil engineers to go the MBA route eventually. Now, I appreciate I didn't do that because my career got me into studying management for a living rather than having to go pay to learn it. But the other thing too is my LinkedIn is only about a third of the pots on the stove, so to speak. So,
Oh no.
so civil engineering definitely is undergrad. I went up to Montreal to McGill and loved it. Got a chance to work on a lot of projects, including the sections of the master plan for the city through my undergrad studies.
Wow.
But I graduated in the financial crisis. So what do you do with a infrastructure and building design degree when no one's building? So I worked for transportation for the city of Boston for a while and crossover with the state, where I still have inroads and do some informal advisory through colleagues. But through project management, ended up coming into the tech side for the first time with Kronos pre-UKG.
Okay.
And from there, that was my first introduction into the HR management and organizational management side. After that, I got my first run at being an analyst. Decided I loved it because that advisory side came through stronger than I was getting on the vendor side. Got exposure to the entire field of vendors and service and advisory providers. And, following the litany on the HCM side, that's where my core career got started. But during that time, outside of what's on LinkedIn, I've done economic development advisory for cities, including Providence, Rhode Island. I continue to do policy advisory for colleagues who serve as city chief engineers. So I've kept up the civil engineering side as well. which ultimately, if you take the two career tracks together, led me to do my Master of Policy Administration at Columbia,
Hmm.
which during that time is when I got exposed to their HCM program, which is where I've taught since I graduated.
Which kind of brings us to today. And by the way, you make a non-linear route sound very linear. So you did a great job of explaining that in a way that made it sound super obvious. Like, why wouldn't you go in this direction? Of course.
I think it's
But
also emblematic given what we're talking about today. It's emblematic too of what a lot of career journeys are going to look like.
yeah,
That you have to always be in touch with what your core skill sets, competencies, and the applications of them are, so that you're not fixating on what others are bringing to you for roles, but what you can bring to a variety of positions.
I first of all, I love that. Thank you for centering us in this conversation for today because I think that that's like super relevant. Um, Talk to me about what you do. What does your role entail? Tell us about IDC, first of all, and then what does your day to day look like?
So IDC is an interesting organization. It's on one hand, we do a lot of industry research around different vendor landscapes and what's going on in the tech sector and translating what different vendors are doing into practical analyses of value for companies in the market. To that end, we talk to vendors all the time to help advise some of their packaging, pricing, branding, and go to market, and help them understand who their strategic buyers are when they may not be landing as well as they hope to.
Yeah.
But we also work with investors and buyers. We do a lot of buyer advisory to connect the dots on the other side. As an industry analyst firm, we don't necessarily shortlist for them because we don't recommend certain vendors over others, but we help them strategically understand what the characteristics of their shortlists are going to be relative to the problems and the challenges they're trying to resolve. Um, and on the investor side, we then connect all those dots together to try to help the market really understand where the opportunities are going, how the tech sector is evolving, and more importantly, if in the HCM side, how the services and strategies are adjusting at different organizations,
Hmm.
and what those trends are leading to in different stakeholder sets, how different technologies are evolving, so that they can get a little bit of a future foresight on where the value is going. So we advise all three sides. When I was outside IDC, I used to call it the IDC triangle,
Hmm.
um, in terms of the model that the company caters to. So we do a lot of survey based research, a lot of buyer engagements, a lot of we attend a lot of vendor events during the year to get exposure to different customer bases and talk to and engage with as many customers, vendors, and investors as we can to provide that triangulated pulse on the market and where it's going. In my little corner of the company, on the side, I'm one of a team of three that reports into our future of work practice. And within that team of three, we're also looking at the organizational strategy side to talk about best practices as well.
I love that. I think that kind of gives us a pretty clear picture. So, it, and it, I feel like I have so many more questions. Kind of like has
Oh,
turned into
trust
a
me,
whole
when
bunch more
somebody asks you
questions.
what an
So,
industry analyst does, it's like,
no,
okay, you
well,
go, whew, how much time you got?
I'm curious who ultimately turns to IDC. So, you talked about folks on the buyer side, and you talked about, how and what you evaluate, and how these things, provide value to those in the market. But what kind of organizations actually come your way, and what are the outcomes that they're actually hoping to see?
Hmm. So technology vendors, as well as service and business change and transformation providers. So you think about the Deloitte's, PwC's, EYs of the world will work with
Okay.
us to understand validated third party trends. We were the provider of those that to understand not just where their customers are going from a buyer sense, but really actually dig into what the strategic challenges are. Because a lot of times, being more independent from that set, we can get customers and clients to tell us things that they wouldn't ordinarily directly tell their vendor or their service provider.
Interesting. Okay.
So the way they'll answer surveys from us, the conversations they'll have with us, the things that they'll disclose, whether we're doing things like an IDC MarketScape, which is a vendor landscape map, or we're doing, custom work like analyst spotlights where we'll run features on different vendors and what they're trying to bring to market, we'll have a little bit more of a realistically grounded story that we can tell apart from a vendor's own marketing. And
Hmm.
that helps customers understand on the buyer side what they should be considering when, why, and how. It helps them understand pricing and packaging expectations. It helps them understand what is strategically going to mesh with how their organization is building its mission and vision and its culture. Um, what's going to help people and augment people at work rather than wholesale replace innovation teams that you don't want to lose that value.
Hmm.
And then again, all of that triangulates back to the investor side where we can convey direct insights about value in the market and where it's going in a clearer picture than what you can sometimes glean from the mess of organic information that you could just search for. So it's on the one hand, we're pulling back insights direct back from the human side that will guide all three of those parties. But it's also the analyst's interpretation to have that foresight and a human to human relationship with each of those, the vendor, the buyer, and the investor, to really drive home some of what a chat GPT just won't, because it can't look ahead into what hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, and it's almost a fourth. I understand the vendor, right? They have their interest in to be able to promote things in the marketplace, and you can help them do that. There's buyers who need products or services, right? And they're looking for a trusted organization that can kind of help them understand what's going to fit those needs that they have. It sounds like there's also advisory firms who help others in the market that essentially need that market research or the expertise so that they can advise on some things that they might not have the
Yeah.
same kind of insight.
So yeah, I mean, and that's, I kind of joke when people ask me what the difference between us and a consultant is. We'll go right up to the line of consulting without being prescriptive. Will, in essence, if you think about, instead of fishing for the layperson, we'll teach the layperson how to fish.
Yeah.
So we'll bring the
Yeah.
insights, the guidance, the best practices, the selection criteria for how to narrow things down. And once they identify their need, they'll have a better window through some of the other materials we do with the vendors as to how to narrow down their scope. So we really teach the stakeholders how to be strategic
Yeah.
and how to approach and look at the market for what they need and sift through that information, because we're looking at it every day.
So, I mean, specifically when it comes to, let's talk about employee experience, your
Mhm.
domain, right? What are these pain points that clients are looking to solve, right? What solutions are they exploring? Basically, what are they trying to accomplish?
So this is a good one because it's on the one hand it's squishy, on the other hand it's defined. I Another sort of stigma for me is one of the things that I hate that they did to my space was call it employee experience, because it relegates it to an HR problem and makes it just about the squishiest thing that finance and operations folks don't want to touch.
That's
The
fair.
reality couldn't be further from the truth. It's every remit's challenge.
Yeah.
So each different stakeholder has a different perspective on the problems governing how employees connect, engage, and ultimately perform at work.
Hmm.
On the traditional HR side, we've got, a dual mandate where HR has to look at how managers are incentivized and empowered and enabled to go address issues of employee performance with the fullest context of how what the employee wants meets what the organization needs to deliver, and how that's constantly fitting together. At the same time, HR needs to aggregate all the insights around performance, productivity, integrate that with business performance, value modeling, and try to make a case to, at the very least, finance and the CEO by way of the finance team to say, here's the impact the workforce is having on outcomes. So if the business is succeeding, great, invest more. If the business is having difficulty, don't take that out on the workforce first. Look at the whole picture.
Yeah.
So context is a really, really big challenge that HR leaders are learning how to broaden their scope on what they look at to identify data sets that are strategic to say, how do we identify the characteristics of success, failure, and everything in between? How do we learn what makes the individual tick so that we can better place them according to where they're most likely to succeed?
Yeah.
Is that place with our organization, or is it something that we're creating? Connect that back into the mechanics of workforce design, position placement, development, workforce planning, and then even map that out to what current and future pay scales are going to look like. For the operations team in NIT, for IT, there's a data mandate back there as to how all this fits together, particularly as AI modeling is now table stakes. But for operations and IT too, there's a physical resourcing side. As we move people around, as they change skill sets or develop new skill sets, as they change role definitions, responsibilities, how do we make sure every individual at every point in time has the tools and resources they need to fluidly continue succeeding at what they're, achieving what they're responsible for? And then on the finance side, how do we pull all that together to know that we're properly managing the balance sheet while financially incentivizing the right parts of the organization to keep moving forward?
I first want to point out, I think I understand why you are teaching at Columbia University. um, but I guess this is kind of a sweeping generalization, but based on that data do you think that employers are overall, giving the workforce the experience that they want, or at least even a good experience? And again, I know it's a generalization, and the things that you talked about, right, are so just seem to be so granular. So if we take a
Mhm.
higher level look at this, I'm curious, how would you answer that question? Or when you think of the workforce overall, do you think that they're satisfied with what their experience is with their employer?
I think satisfaction, if we're measuring satisfaction, the answer is, oh God, no. But if we're measuring orientation, is HR oriented towards an experience first engagement with employees? Are managers focused on it in the right ways? Yeah, that needle has moved. That ship has turned in the right direction. For some organizations, it's still turning, but by and large, table stakes for a good place to work or a great place to work. Not to co-opt a product name here, but um, is that your business has to some extent be focused on empowering managers to at least be sensitive and aware of employee satisfaction and stress factors,
Hmm.
and understanding when you've got the wrong puzzle piece in the wrong place.
Yeah.
So yeah, that the orientation has shifted, so the intent now is in the right direction. But there are still long roads ahead of a lot of companies to get to what a successful outcome looks like. But that means that ESAP is on the rise.
I like that you mentioned stress factors, which I think historically, I mean, even still currently, is just entirely neglected.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I'm curious, what do you see in data with relationship to that, right? Um, or do you see, are there particular trends that you see, whether it's about employee experience or not, that you've been following with it's about how employers are able to measure or see that type of sentiment data, right? Or at least understand motivation, right, behind an
Hmm.
employee's decisions.
I think it's important first to note that stress and motivation, or stress and disengagement, these are not synonymous. These are not all the same things. These are individual parts of a bigger equation. And so when we measure motivation, we measure engagement, we measure satisfaction, the business definition of those is oriented around where can I put an employee to drive towards success. It's all focused on the employee delivered outcome and how the business can better partner to facilitate that. And still in the context of the business first KPIs, retention, um, increasing tenures, which goes hand in hand with retention, but also the employee's ability to deliver more efficient outcomes because they're actually motivated to do what they're doing.
Yeah.
And we put them in a position where we've homed in on those metrics. We've looked at what those factors are, and we're setting them up for success. The
Let's
stress
talk.
side is a little different.
Okay.
The stress side is something that's historically historically companies have tried to manage rather than measure. And the
Hmm.
reason for that is because sources of stress are highly organic, they're highly individual, and they're hard to quantify in an individual sense. So the field of well-being has emerged, with has proliferated with a myriad of solutions to try to manage for different aspects of this. And I would argue that that field is still very much maturing because there isn't a central framework, despite the fact that we've had some vendors emerge to try to centralize some of it,
Hmm.
or centralize access to some of it. There's a lot of different individual reasons why an employee will incur stress. Some of it's workplace, some of it's home, some of it's job security, some
Yeah.
of it's financial issues, could be sleep, could be, it could be uncertainty around where their skills development is going to go. I mean, we could have this bipolar effect where an employee is being given skills development so they know their employer's investing in them, but they don't see where the direction is, so they're stressed about relevance. There's a lot of complexity built into that, so it's still focused on managing versus measuring.
You kind of at the beginning you started talking about some of these factors, and it's safe to assume that there are many that
Hmm.
impact the experience. Um, and I know that everything could be a valid answer here, but I'm curious if you can highlight, what do you see as the biggest or some of the biggest or some of the bigger factors that leaders have to be aware of when it comes to positively or negatively impacting that experience?
I think I'll start with the negative side because it's a little easier, and I like finishing on a high note. So,
Okay.
tear things down, build them up. Um, on the negative side, I think that employers have to become a little bit more aware, particularly in their leadership teams, just how much uncertainty impacts individuals. And, yes, it impacts employees, but the reason it impacts employees is because individuals need some sense of security and control.
Yeah.
Now, the old adage that change is the only thing that's certain. Yeah, there's the truth is that uncertainty is something that as humans we have to get a little bit better at getting comfortable with. But there, you runaway uncertainty where you have absolutely no sense of control. Yeah, that's not fair to do to your workers. And employers really do have to get more sensitive to how to manage that and build an environment where
Yeah.
employees have tools, have resources to get a better sense of control. And just shoving everything down for self management to an employee is not enough. And frankly, it's not an answer. I mean, I've worked for a number of companies and advised even more about the fact that self service is great for a lot of things, but if you're constantly throwing tools and resources at employees without giving them the time to manage it, then the tools are useless. It's not giving them more certainty, it's overwhelming them. So at some point, employers have to sit back and say, what does my infrastructure look like? Am I throwing too much at the employees to manage themselves? How much, do I have to partner with them better? Do I have to enable them better? And do I have to be there for them a little bit more? And it's not this, should my workplace be a family thing? It's more just that the employer has a responsibility to be in the balance for that with their workers. Otherwise, they're not going to see the performance and productivity that they want to see.
Yeah.
Um, on the flip side, when we're looking at success, we've gotten a lot better about, skills equity, talent placement, and starting to get in the groove performance wise around what employees want, what their goals are,
Yeah.
and fitting that into what the organization needs to see for itself. So we're getting the quantifiable side done really well. And new tools and resources, or even updates to your existing core solutions, or partner solutions. Like I love to highlight the voice of the employee and recognition space because those are the tools where employee experience transformation begins.
Yeah.
Um, that are starting to really tell us not just how our employees performing, but why.
Yep. That
And
behavior. I mean,
how do
that's
we
that behavioral graph that's so
yeah,
critical.
like how do we manage against the negative and set them up for the positive, within the confines of skills related to performance and goals related to performance. All the stuff that we used to track annually with manager on one side of the table, employee on the other. We now have a flow of data where we can see that, continuously and start to set employees up for success. And so that part we're getting really done really well. that partnership is strengthening in droves.
I would love to know. I mean, if you're giving advice, you know, or you're teaching business leaders, how to get better at understanding the realities of their businesses and what their workforce is really up against on front lines. How do you differentiate based on, you know, business vertical,
Mhm.
size, the scope of the organization, or what they do? Or do you find the problems to be pretty homogenous, just across the spectrum?
I would say themes end up being homogenous, but how they play out is very different by industry and then by size within industry. And I would say that size and industry kind of form a matrix.
Tell me more.
It's not that you just subcategorize for one and then the other. Um, and so yeah, I mean, when we talk about these themes, better partnerships on the emotional and human side, while measurement for performance is strengthening on the other side. That's a broad theme that is somewhat industry and size agnostic, but the methodologies and the challenges for execution in that are very different by industry and size. The mid market and small businesses don't have the same digital and automation proliferation that their enterprise counterparts do.
Yeah.
And now that we're transitioning to AI, their stories of how they're going to get from point A to point B are incredibly different, and we can't treat them all the same. Um,
But some's
and
being democratized to some extent, right? So that they can now compete a little more easily, or at least use some tools that have some similar capabilities.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you think about AI's ability to create light versions of, more expensive platform-based tools and capabilities, yeah, some of those have stronger capabilities to come downstream into smaller businesses. They definitely have the ability to do automated intake of at least policy and regulatory nuances across industries and geographies. But still, that doesn't discount the fact that the state of existing data in different organizations of different size and in different industries is going to be of different quality. That the strengths of the players and the stakeholders needed to drive solution deployment and adoption is going to vary wildly, not just widely, but wildly. And the expectations and the level of trust, at a cultural level that the organization's built with its employees is going to be incredibly company specific. So
Mhm.
just as much as we want to personalize, delivery and engagement on the HR side, I think vendors and solution and service providers also have to be aware just how much they have to take advantage of personalized CX in their own pipelines
Yep.
to get to know their prospective clients as quickly as they can, because
Yeah.
there is an expectation of hyper personalized delivery and configuration.
Yeah, I mean, amen to that last part, especially. I think that's kind of a critical piece there. Um, Speaking of, because I think you just sort of started touching on this, I think that, well, with all this stuff in mind, what do leaders need to know in order to set up people's success from day one? Either the businesses, right, themselves that are managing their people, or the platforms that are supporting the
Mhm.
infrastructure that the businesses use, right? And so how do they set them up for success for day one when it comes to their employee experience? What should they be doing for the workforce to experience individual and collective success?
So the first thing before you do anything, before you try to improve the organization, come up with a strategy, any of that stuff, is figure out your communications. No one likes to have blanket change thrown at them and be blindsided by it.
Yep.
No one, even if it's a new tool that's supposed to help them, you're going to get resistance if you're not project planning your communications. So you got to have a comms strategy of some kind. And even if you're a small business of 100 or fewer employees, you still have to figure out how you're communicating with your workers, to whether they have a seat at the table or are they just influencing what you're doing. What's the timeline going to be because you've actually bothered to ask them. So there has to be something there that's going to reach out to them and include them in the process. It's key to making them feel more certain. It's key to making them feel like they can do this, they can embrace what you're going to offer.
Mhm.
And it's key to also understanding whether or not your perception of your business challenges is actually what the challenges are. So figure out your comms, make them two-way, make sure that the front line is, and the folks that are in your line of business execution with your clients are connected back to your senior leadership and vice versa to make sure that loop is closed. That whatever the ELT wants to do to realize whatever opportunities the shareholders or the business owners think they want to realize, that the CEO is the one guiding, what the realistic configuration for the business is going to be, that you're not just leaving it to finance when CEO says, here's the goal.
Right.
So consult your organization, work with them, build a comm strategy.
I
Once
think
you've
that
done
that
that,
yeah, go
talk to
ahead.
IT, pull them out. They're no longer the guys in the back office in the back cave, just configuring your laptops when you hire somebody new. They're in charge of your data strategy. You got to bring them to the table. You got to
Yeah.
ask them what's possible. What insights are we working with? Are our people insights actually part of our financial modeling and reporting? Are we modernized across the board? What does our hot mess look like? And can we build our data strategy to match our comm strategy towards what we want to do? So
Yeah.
make sure that the data is a true mirror of your organization to the extent that you need it to be before you decide what you're going to do next, before you talk to a vendor and say, that sounds nice, let's try it. And then from there, you can think about your gaps, talk to your stakeholders, try to break down some of this ownership autonomy and, within your finance, HR,
Hmm.
operations folks,
Yeah.
and try to kind of convince them, hey, you can own your processes, but we got to start bringing your insight sets together.
All that makes a lot of sense. Going back to what you were originally saying about improving comms, having a communication strategy, really sounds like a key element is empowering your people to have a say.
Yep.
So you can really better understand what your problems are, right, and how to fix them. What about environments that are negative or toxic? Right, there are a couple of key questions that I'm curious about here. The first is, how do you determine if the employee experience is toxic? And then second would be, if it is, what are the steps to turn it around?
So toxicity can be a tricky one to get some honesty about. I mean, there are times when I've had across my career where I've had buyers that have come to me to say, we think this is going on, but we think they'll tell you things they won't tell us. And I've actually done focus groups with buyers, employee sets to understand. Talk to me, tell me. I'm not going to name any of you in the report, but just tell me what's
Mm,
going on. I need the themes here. Um, and then there are times that innocuously we can just say to leadership teams, the first thing you're going to have to do is be a little humble, fall on your sword for the fact that you may not have been managing or paying attention to this part of your organization. Admit that the hands got a little bit away from the head, so the head doesn't necessarily know what the hands are doing. And so you're coming down to the lines to really just understand, you know, in some cases, that requires a little bit of an undercover boss type scenario to know what's
mm,
going on.
yeah,
In other cases, just a little honesty goes a long way. A little honesty and accountability.
yeah.
I've seen CEOs, particularly at small to mid-sized businesses, even change their accountability frameworks to
Hmm.
make the CEO, even for a short time, accountable to certain sentiment and performance measures in the front line, so that whatever the employees do, the CEO is immediately accountable for. It's
Yeah,
not just about
correct.
business performance. And when they rebuild that into the contract and they can show that and display that to employees, they get more honest answers.
That's really interesting. Actually, quite compelling, and I can understand how, given that kind of responsibility, might make leadership change how they behave, right?
It's
Or
kind of
or
like bringing
design.
the crown under the Constitution.
Yeah, yeah. So employee recognition, appreciation, it's something we focus on here a lot at Mustard Hub, right? I have a lot of thoughts on how appreciation and recognition can impact workers, but what role do you think recognition plays in the employee experience? What are your thoughts?
I think it's incredibly important, and I think its title is why it sometimes gets undervalued.
Tell me
Again,
more about that.
recognition like employee experience immediately gets written off to this HR thing. It's touchy, it's line of business, it's just to make people feel good.
Hmm.
That's when you talk to a non-HR person, that's the first instinct they get about it. And they couldn't be more wrong. There's so much more to it than that. Yes, recognition is crowdsourcing success measure markers where they show up. On the one hand, for the individual, it's giving them a chance to earn some non-fixed compensation for a good job well done. So it's destructuring bonuses a little bit without replacing them. Shouldn't replace them,
Mhm.
but
Potentially
but
even mitigating tax liability, but yeah, it's a
correct.
whole other conversation.
And it's giving employees a little more freedom to exercise even how they cash in on them. So there's a structural benefit, absolutely. But on the data side, it's recognition data has been advancing the efficiency of voice of the employee towards transitioning businesses to an experience first, employee journey orchestration. And in turns out is really kind of useful in that regard towards advancing underlying, AI driven talent placement.
Oh, yeah.
So you think about voice of the employee, you collect a lot of employee sentiment, whether you do it through fixed surveys or continuous feedback loops, however you do it. All of that data is great, but you're looking at both a mixture of the positive and the negative, and you're sending either your AI engine or data analyst or a combination of the two to sift through and separate the markers so they can direct managers to mitigate the negative and incentivize HR to drive further into the positive, whether through workforce orchestration or again manager enablement, saying yes we can promote employee A or whatever the result is. Recognition has a built-in incentive for employees to participate and actually use the solution in terms of the points exchange and the value drivers that are built into recognition systems. But because you're crowdsourcing performative enablers and markers of them straight from employees in terms of how they lift
Yeah.
each other up, you're automatically filtering for those markers of success. So when you integrate that into your understanding of employee performance, yeah, as a manager, I can see, okay, employee A and employee B may be in the same role, but employee A tends to work better under these conditions and in teams under this format, whereas employee B works better in these situations with teams under that format.
Right.
So maybe I should kind of split their direction and path their journeys a little bit differently and that's going to help me drive them into different success, trajectories from this one starting point. And that's going to impact skills and training direction. That's
Yeah.
going to impact team assignments, giving different shifts. It's going to mean a lot.
I mean, leaders are constantly looking for ways to improve themselves. You're literally talking about a cheat sheet. Here are the clues, right? Here's exactly what you need to do better. So, I mean, I don't need you to say mustard up here, but I'm curious what avenues you see for leaders who want to do better by their people when it comes to recognizing the great work that their team does. When it comes to crowdsourcing those success markers, what do they need to be doing to show their people that not just that they're appreciated, but that they're listening to all of these things, right? I mean, the workforce obviously wants it. They need, the businesses need it. The folks involved need it. What do the leaders need to do?
People today, and it's not just about employees. I think just about in everything that we do, because we get so sort of emotionally involved and triggered by everything around us because of digital proliferation and the resulting isolation. People need to see results, not just hear words.
Okay.
So on the one hand, that's another beautiful thing about recognition is that it does result in an action. You actually get rewarded at the same time that somebody's saying, "Hey, you did a good job,"
Yeah, and
or you,
ideally in that moment that matters.
yeah. So there is a direct result attached to it. And it allows employees even to set momentary goals for themselves. So let's say my company allows me to exchange points for an extended vacation time or a paid time off. And I'm setting myself up for a vacation that I want to be 10 days, but I only have 7 days. I can set a goal for myself to outperform on my usual targets and try to drive towards that. I'm not gonna, there's very little incentive to go to my colleagues and say, hey, could you throw some points my way? if it's undeserved, because that'll show up as outliers in the bigger data set. But there is a direct incentive for me to try to perform towards that target. Um, in the bigger picture, there's also a results driven outcome for management teams to get employees towards their best configured work environment faster, because that has a direct impact on business outcomes and success. So, starting to organically surface what an employee's journey should look like, we can measure that against, hey, did they set their goals realistically around what they're good at and what they strive towards? Did I understand their goals in the context of what they are striving to? So maybe the way I'm thinking about what they told me they were isn't right. So, how I might have set up their career journey, maybe I need to rethink that, and maybe the system is giving me insights to fix that, so that I don't lose them somewhere in the future while I'm riding this high on their engagement today. Um, so, as a business leader, it allows me to hyper personalize their journeys while still keeping my eye on the ball towards whatever the aggregated business outcomes are that I need to see or exceed.
Yeah. Do you see this changing as the world of work evolves? I mean, do you think leaders need to change what they're doing when it comes to supporting and acknowledging their ever-changing workforce?
I think this goes back a little bit to the beginning of the track here, where they need to where the dual mandate between balancing between employee engagement and business results was HR has been HR's responsibility.
Mhm.
I think that now also needs to be at the very least shared with the CEO's vision, responsibility for the vision,
Yeah.
that you can't let it be subsumed under the paradigm of finance, who's going to be immediately concerned with controlling costs and sit
Yeah.
between the CEO and the CHRO. You need to make sure that these concerns are reaching the business vision orchestration at the top.
So let's keep looking ahead. Predictions on what the future of work is gonna look like from this standpoint.
It's going to be incredibly messy. And in a good way. I think, we've got in one camp, we've got everything's going to go to gigs. We've got, can we get to shift based, task management within systems? We've tried this experiment called skills, which it turns out we can orchestrate around, but we have a hard time valuing. So we still have a role based value structure with a skills based orchestration structure. Um, we've got full time jobs. We've got, agents now coming into the mix where companies mistakenly think they can automate out entry level talent. In 5-10 years time, those same companies are going to realize they have no innovation pipeline from new workers. So it's we're going through a huge period right now where we're rethinking the human contribution at work. And the advice that I have to organizations as they're doing this is, don't think about what you can replace in the immediate, because the future of technology is not automation, it's augmentation. And I know that narrative has been spun by so many HR folks out there, but I'm not an HR originalist. I come at it from the engineering side, the financial side, the ops management side, and the workforce management side, looking at how probabilistic systems fit into a business, which is what AI is. That is how you augment humans to stay focused on the things they want to do that deliver value to the business versus the things they have to do.
You made a comment just, a second ago, gigs, shift based. How do folks engage with team members who are so much more disconnected, right, to the organization, right? It's almost like you have it's inherently misaligned, right? We talk about wanting to better engage our employees. Talk about wanting to create this experience for people, and yet the future of work may look like inherently disconnected people. How do you do that? How do you create a system that is essentially worker classification agnostic?
So, believe it or not, we've been doing it for years. We just haven't been thinking about it. So, when I was, I don't know, by 2 years before, up to the point of 2 years before when COVID shut everything down, I mean, we were all studying the dissonance and the replacement theory of contingent talent versus full time. And
Hmm.
this was about, when people were finally throwing the word, the letters VMS around, like all of a sudden it was something new to the market and hyped. And, meanwhile, it was a 30, 40-year old technology, and or concept, at least on the BPO side. And today we see those systems integrated. We see contingent and full-time talent really being treated the same, having the same opportunities. One can transition to the other freely. And so the engagement strategy for people in the organization, if you're building it on a human level, really can be the same. And the incumbency on the vendors is to make it easier for employers to decide what resources can be extended to them, to each different classification, and just turn them on and off at will without these complex ingestion and outflow requirements. I mean, a reason why you didn't have, temporary or contracted employees going deep into the HRIS, they live in the VMS, was because it was complex and time consuming and a data burden to put them that deep in the system. So you had to have a secondary record system. We don't have to do that anymore. So the technology, should be enabling record management, promotion, engagement, and development the same way for every person, regardless of how they're brought into the organization, because it's not as crazy deep and complex to enmesh them in these tools. Consequently, if everybody's enabled the same, there shouldn't be really any cultural dissonance between how I treat employee A or employee B because of how they're with the organization. I shouldn't be
Yeah.
able to tell the difference.
Um,
If the company doesn't make a big deal about it, I won't.
yeah. So, you know, uh, I love that, by the way. And I don't think a lot of people think about it like that, right? That we've been doing it. We just don't think about it that way.
Mhm.
And I think to some degree, I would agree with that. I think that there are instances, right, where those contract workers are treated very differently, right, depending on the type of organization or the industry that you're in, right, or the way that the business might be configured and what it is that they're doing. But I think all, by and large, I think that's a really great observation.
Well,
To kind of
and
wrap it up, I'm always.
the
Yeah,
last
yeah,
bit I just want to put a plug in again comes back to comms. So
yeah,
let's say
yeah.
you've got a high turnover position because you're constantly contracting for it, and it's not on renewal, that you're bringing somebody new in every time, which is expensive, but some companies do it. Um, just make sure that the teams that are dependent on them have enough, fore time and aft time to be able to understand, person A is going out, maintain your personal correspondence with them, but we're
Yeah,
gonna onboard you and the new person to each other
yeah,
to keep the
yeah,
flow going. So again, you got to reduce that uncertainty.
yeah. Good advice. Always super curious. Love to kind of wrap up with this question. If leaders come to you, I know this happens, right? So if when or if a business leader came to you for advice on really how to get it right with, when it comes to building alignment across the organization, engaging their workforce, you only have a minute. You're on an elevator to the top floor before the doors open and they walk right out the door. What is that very first thing, that one thing that you tell them?
You got two things you got to tend to: data and people. You got to make sure your data is in order so that you can identify gaps and strategically fill them, and they have to be filled in accordance with what your communication strategy is returning to you that your employees feel is missing.
Hmm.
You've got to manage both concurrently. You've got to drive towards outcomes in each, leveraging each into the other. And most importantly, you have to build a strategy to do it before you do anything about it. If you're going in blind, you're not going to succeed.
I love that. Build a strategy for it before you build a strategy of what you're going to do about it.
Mhm.
I like that. Thank you. Thank you so much for speaking with me today, Zach. I really appreciate you taking the time.
This was great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. For all of you who are watching or listening to this episode, thank you for tuning in to Mustard Hub Voices Behind the Build. Subscribe, like, share, and comment. Be sure to check us out at mustardhub.com to see how we help companies become destinations for workplace happiness and turn culture into a competitive edge. And sign up to get started with Mustard Hub for free while you're there. Until next time.